welcome to At Your Convenience. My name is Melissa Vonderhaar. I am the chair of the CSP C-Store Cannabis Board. And joining me today are Dan Razowsky of R-Marts and Rick Schepp of GTI and Rhythm. And we are here to talk all things hemp beverages, convenience, and specifically, both of you operate out of the Chicago market. So both Rick and Dan, your companies are based out of Chicago. So why don't we start there? Chicago is kind of a fascinating market because while Illinois does not officially have hemp regulations the way a state like Minnesota or Georgia does, when we were discussing where to host this first annual CSP C-Store Cannabis Forum, Chicago was at the top of the list and where we actually went. The three of us got to go out to a restaurant and enjoy ordering hemp beverages off the market, many delicious rhythm drinks. So can you talk about kind of what is going on specifically within Chicago and the hemp beverage market? And I'll start with Dan.
So I think we all know it's a very exciting thing right now. And I think as soon as we knew that we were able to carry it, we were all over it. So I think each city has its own, milligram strength. So I think that was kind of a tricky play with it. But I think we were really just looking for partners that was really willing to jump on the wagon with us. And GTI Rhythm and Senorita was really on top of the list. I know at first it was a little bit hard to kind of figure out how do we get started, but I think it's once we found the right, partners of brands that really wanted to get on board, that really helped us kind of get the ball rolling. And yeah, so it's been over a year now. So it's really exciting just to keep the momentum going and just seeing really sky's the limit on how much this can grow. Hopefully everything plays out nicely in November and we'll see.
Absolutely. And I'd be remiss not to mention you looked rather smart with the GTI Rhythm partnership because after you guys had brought them in, you became, Rick, your company, your brand became the first to be sold at the United Center, the first to be sold at a major sporting center, arena, as well as you recently partnered with the Navy Pier for that concert as well. Can you talk about what you're seeing as a brand level from the Chicago market, both on and off premise? It's very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Illinois has been interesting because we haven't had those regulations. We thought there were going to be regulations that at the last minute got vetoed. But it has been a pretty healthy market. I'd say overall, it was a little slow to ramp up relative to some of the markets in the Southeast or Minnesota. But I've seen, really nice, awareness growth that continues to build this summer. So, with it being our home market, we certainly have, invested heavily here in the state. And in the city, you mentioned United Center. That's been awesome. We're at all of the non-sporting events at the United Center and continue to see the awareness and trial continue to pick up as more and more consumers are aware that they can try a THC drink at the United Center, which is really cool. Then we recently extended that to Navy Pier as well. So their beer garden is now branded the Rhythm THC Beverage Beer Garden. That name might not be quite right, so apologies to our marketing team. But really, what we're seeing is that adoption. I think the lack of regulations really slowed things down early on, where people weren't sure: is this going away? Is it okay? Is it not? But over time, as everybody's seen, the grocery store down the street start selling it, right? The bar next door. I think that's just encouraged more and more people to top on board in the absence of those clear regulations. But overall, what we've seen on premise, like all markets, is a little hesitant, especially around insurance and what does it mean for serving somebody and intoxication for their staff to be managing that. But we've really seen a really nice uptick, especially as some of these real landmark locations in Chicago are now selling it. I think that gives a certain amount of air cover, to the broader, restaurant, convenience store, grocery chains to say, okay, hey, if they can do it, we can probably give it a try too. So like Dan said, the biggest thing we're working around right now is individual municipalities having different bans or regulations. That's really the one trade-off when you don't have regulations at the state level. Everybody tries to put their own things in place and it becomes a real patchwork that, I feel for Dan and all the retailers to navigate when there's 2 stores out of 100 that you can't sell or 2 out of 5, whatever it is. That really changes the operational game.
Oh boy, Rick, I hate to break it to you. Having worked in tobacco for 15 years, even once there are state regulations, those little local municipalities, especially in a state like Illinois or Minnesota or California, they're still hyperactive. They kind of try to top out the state. So buckle up, everybody, because as we get normalization, we'll see more of that probably.
It'll
Uh,
still be probably better than cannabis. So we'll take it from our side.
Probably. And I wanted to bring that up. So, the other unique thing about Chicago and Illinois as a whole is that Illinois has a robust, very successful marijuana market, cannabis market. Unlike a state like Minnesota, which is only just starting to get its marijuana market up and running, a state like Georgia that doesn't have it, a state like Texas that only has medical. Illinois has been selling very, very well in its adult recreational market. But hemp beverages are also doing outstanding. Kind of from your guys' perspective, and I'll start with Rick because GTI obviously is in the cannabis space. What has that taught us about the ability for marijuana and hemp at mainstream retailers to exist cohesively and both be successful?
Yeah, I think when you look at hemp beverages, especially 5 and 10 milligram low dose products, these are largely two distinct customers, and that's really for me personally. This has been a good reminder, having been in cannabis for close to 5 years, thinking about that world all the time. You sort of lose sight of how many people are open to trying an edible or beverage or THC in general, but that stigma of going to a dispensary, it's not a fun experience, as most state programs have kind of designed it. They want it to be very well controlled, and it gives you that feeling of I'm doing something wrong, even if you're not. So I think that's what we've seen is just the availability when your product is at R-Mart and you're already gassing up and grabbing an energy drink to grab a can of THC beverage. That's very second nature to people, and we see that in grocery and liquor. Across the board, people know how to consume beverages. They know what THC is, and there's a lot of latent demand and interest. But when put in the right place for people to buy it and in the right format for something that's easily controlled, I know how to consume a beverage. It really just works. So from a cannabis side, we see this as really incremental to the THC market overall, because it's bringing consumers towards THC and getting to experience what that product can offer for them. And we expect over time, some chunk of consumers will continue to explore what else is there with this cannabis plant, because we think there's a lot more than just Delta 9 THC. But others, this might be exactly what they want and stop there. And we're very comfortable with both of those.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many people I've spoken with after giving them a low dose THC beverage that they go, oh, this is what THC does. It's kind of this aha moment. And it suddenly they're interested in the dispensary or more open to the dispensary, or they're very happy with that low dose beverage and that's where they're going to stick. Dan, I wanted to turn to you. There's a lot of players in this market. At one point, I heard over 750 THC beverage brands out there. It's a little bit like the early days of vape. And you've obviously partnered with a number of brands, but can you talk about kind of what benefits you've seen from partnering with a company like GTI and Rhythm that has experience in the marijuana cannabis space?
Yeah, so I think the really nice thing with GTI and Rhythm and Senorita is they have a really nice floor display for a cooler, and we can brand it really nicely, and it's very clearly labeled THC. I think that's a really at least like a safe minded to a customer when you approach it and when you look at it. Same thing with our coolers. We have the suction cup window clings that's from IC, and it's very nicely labeled, and it's just another avenue of being able to get customers to see that we carry this stuff. So we're just starting to branch out in that sense, but I think a lot of it is just the marketing and the graphics of it kind of really helps trust it and make it fun. I mean, we're really going all the way to the pumps too. We're saying, hey, we got THC at the pumps. So we're trying to touch every customer that comes to the pumps. And then once we're able to hopefully get them inside, it's screaming that we have THC type of thing. But it really helps to have brands like GTI and brands that we are behind that looks legit and it looks clearly labeled. So I think that gains a lot of trust as operators that we get from our customers, that it looks like we know what we're doing, type of thing.
Absolutely. No, it's a little reminiscent of the early days of the first adult rec markets, where if you drove around Colorado, there were kind of the green crosses or the indicator of, hey, this is here, because the average consumer, the average person still doesn't expect to be able to pick up THC at their local convenience store. So I think that that branding and awareness is a huge, huge piece of it. Rick, I wanted to chat with you on the flip side about partnering with R-Marts. You guys have had a very successful partnership. Yet, GTI and Rhythm, big company. You play with Circle K, you're with Total Wine, you're with a lot of really large retailers. What benefits have you seen for a kind of robust partnership with a smaller or mid-sized retailer like R-Marts?
Yeah, I think, from our side, we run the full gamut of independent single stores all the way up through like Circle K, like you mentioned. But to us, these brands and these products need to be everywhere, because like you were just talking about awareness, I'm still shocked at how many people I talk to now that shop at Binny's, where Binny's has leaned into THC. If you shop in there, you should know THC is there, but they still have no idea that's an actual option. So for us, we see this as a just ubiquity play where, wherever consumers are, we want our products to be available. And, with R-Mart, obviously being local, the nice thing is our teams kind of know each other. And so as they were getting into the space, we were able to, really partner more and talk about, what are you trying to do? Which stores? How do you do it? And we're actually able to sit down and walk through all the stores with them and say, okay, where could coolers go? Oh, we don't have electricity there. What can we do differently? And we really just approach it like any other chain. Obviously, the scale of what you can do in programming, it looks different. But for us, we also like that nimble mindset, right? It's a lot easier for the R-Mart team to pivot and say, yeah, let's try X promotion than, a really large chain that has several approvals. So both obviously add different things to the equation. But for us, we want to partner with everybody, and we can't say, oh, that's a small chain. It doesn't matter. If a consumer's going there, that's their chain and that's their location that we want to be.
That'll serve you well in convenience, where 90,000 of the 152,000 stores are single stores. And, I think you're right. It's you're not going to get the reach of a larger retailer. However, when it comes to, hey, we want to try something new and exciting, when you just have one person that can make that call, as opposed to, and I say this as somebody that works for a small company too. There's one person I can go to that can say yes or no, and half the time that person is me, as opposed to I've worked at larger companies and it's 6 or 7 rounds of approval to get something done quickly.
Sometimes that's a low number every now and then.
Also true, especially when legal gets involved. Dan, you spoke at the first ever CSP C-Store Cannabis Forum, and one of the things that really stood out to me from your presentation was the actual data that you showed. We hear a lot that THC beverages are cannibalizing beer and alcohol sales. They're hurting beer and alcohol sales, that these products have come out a couple years ago and you're seeing alcohol sales go down. You had data that totally contradicted this. So can you talk about what you are seeing in your stores and what you would say to somebody that tries to argue that THC beverages are hurting other adult beverage categories?
Yeah, absolutely. So every month I run our beer category numbers, and then you almost have to take out THC until we get like a full year's worth of data. So I'm just tracking just beer, just same items versus previous year. And we're month over month, we're seeing growth in our beer category. So, and then obviously if you throw the THC all back into the beer category, the numbers are even obviously way better. But the point being is I'm seeing it's not hurting our beer numbers. And I almost feel like the customers are seeing that we have the options of THC, and they're seeing that we have it's kind of opening their eyes up to a wider selection that we may have in the beer cave or beer area, beer doors. we're starting to work in the THC drinks into the beer doors. So I think that's kind of creating some excitement in the area. And I'm not sure exactly if they're buying THC and then they're also buying, beer on top of that. I can't tell you that, but I can just know from looking in the numbers. Um, it's gratifying to see that it's not hurting our beer numbers. It would raise some red flags to us if it was. So, and I haven't heard any noise from our team that it's hurting it in any way. So I can get
That's
nitty
great.
gritty with numbers, but I don't think we need to. We can share that another day if we want.
Well, here, I've got some prepared. So you are obviously, R-Marts is fortunate because your beer sales are going up. I just spoke with Nielsen recently, and they pulled the numbers for states where THC beverages are allowed. In those states, beer sales are down 2%. But in running the numbers, Nielsen equates 0.2% of that 2% decline as being due to THC beverages, which is incredibly low. I don't think anybody would snuff at that given the margins and the growth that we're seeing in that category. So, Rick, I wanted to see if you had any perspective as somebody that's national. Obviously, you're probably not studying beer numbers, but, I think what I am hearing from a lot of people that are doing this, including on the liquor store side, they're seeing people buy THC beverages with alcoholic products. One of the major retailers said the most common items in a THC beverage basket are Chardonnay, Tito's, and champagne. So the women are coming and buying, but they're getting both. So, are you, from what you're seeing, and you speak with retailers kind of across the board, is this cannibalizing? How do we debunk this myth?
Yeah, the cannibalizing stuff, because there's so many variables that are going into alcohol consumption right now, and it's really tough for everybody to separate out what's GLP-1, THC, just general trends.
FDA letter,
FDA letter. I mean, when I bought my Apple Watch, I started to see my deep sleep, how much that was affected if I had an extra drink at night, and that just got me thinking about it differently. So there's a lot of factors playing into how people are thinking about alcohol, and likely a bit of a different way than they have in years past. But what we hear from our customers is less about cannibalization, but more about thinking about the whole store. And many of them are just looking at it from, I don't actually care if it's THC taking it or not. What I want to make sure customers are still coming in and they're still building their baskets. And what we're hearing from all of our retailers is that, yes, a lot of people will come in for THC, but they're buying alcohol, to your point, right? They're buying other categories. So it's incremental to the basket. And that's really where I think a lot of the retailers are getting excited. Yes, it's helping offset declines in alcohol. How much it could be, driven by that, there could be a piece. But when you talk to a retailer and they say, hey, without THC this year, I would not have had growth, but I did have growth this year because of THC. I think that says it all, where it's less about the exact mechanics of those consumption shifts, but more from a retailer point of view, how can we bring people in, offer them the products they want? Because it's not just the THC beverages that they're coming for. They're going to reach for the 6-pack of beer, Chardonnay, champagne, some candy on their way out, oftentimes comparing. So I think there's a lot of benefits that retailers are seeing beyond any just concern of that cannibalization.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of what was happening with vapor versus cigarettes. Cigarettes has been such a giant piece of the tobacco pie for years, but they've been on the decline for years. And vapor comes along, and you could make an argument it's cannibalizing cigarettes. There's certainly people that switched from cigarettes to vapor. But I'd argue those consumers were leaving cigarettes no matter what. Vapor gave them somewhere to go. And to your point, we now track total nicotine consumption, not just cigarettes. It's no longer one piece of the category. And this seems to be where the adult consumer is leaning into, whether it's this or NA. We're just seeing a lot of that. So, Dan, you're 1 year in about, right? I believe July hits 1 year for R-Marts. Into your THC beverage journey, THC journey as a whole. What have you learned about this category and the customer?
It's funny. I think people like stronger stuff. Like Rick, we brought in the 25 milligram rhythm, and it's like it's the top of it's the top two SKUs of all the THC. People like stronger strengths. I'm surprised because for me personally, if I have a 25 milligram, that would be a bit much for me. But, I mean, I think that our customers, they have their way of lifestyles and they obviously know what they're doing and they obviously can handle it. But I think that's kind of the big growth is really the milligram strength. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in November if they cap it to 10 milligrams or whatever it is. If people end up, going for twofers or getting a case or whatever it is, so I think that will be interesting. And I think the other thing too is just, instead of, I think the low dose, we have a customer that will, at one of our stores, the most we can have is 2.5 milligrams. And he's not just buying one, he's buying like 6 cans a day, which is to me, it sounds crazy, but he's, in my head, he's probably sipping on it throughout the day and he's getting his fix that way instead of having a 1 can of, whatever it is, 20 milligrams or whatever it may be. So I think there's just so many creative ways to use it and get it in your system. So I think that's been entertaining just to see how the strength has grown from 20 to 25 is now our top seller. So that's been fun to see.
Nice. Rick, is there anything that has surprised you, having invested in the convenience space? Is there anything that has surprised you or that you have a takeaway in terms of, the convenience shopper or how these products have performed at convenience?
No, I think, what Dan saw is we do see in convenience, higher dose products do sell faster. From our side, we do have 1 to 25 milligram products. Generally, we believe, 5-10 milligrams is the sweet spot for the broader category. But I think what's been interesting for me is I came from a spirits background at Beam Suntory at the time. So convenience was always a smaller piece of our business. As I came into this space and really started working with you, Melissa, and a lot of the chains that we're working with today, it really opened my eyes to just the scale and the natural importance of a C-store to every consumer. Most people don't think about it that much, but everybody has their C-store that they go to when they need something quick. So for me, that's just been a really helpful reframe of thinking about where are people purchasing beverages, how does this fit into their life, and then how do our products fit into that same customer journey. So for us, it's just been exciting to be able to reach so many consumers, have such a broad footprint of C-store partners throughout all of our markets. So that's really been what's been most interesting, is just that power and reach that all the C-stores collectively have. And it's been fun to watch how THC has been really embraced by this category.
Absolutely. And I find the dosage conversation fascinating. I'm a long time cannabis consumer, yet I prefer 5 milligram, especially if it's a social situation. To Dan's point, I might even do the 2.5s if it's going to be a long night, because I'll sip like I would a glass of wine. The 10s I reserve for if I'm folding laundry and it's my kind of, okay, I'm going to relax and this is the one thing I'm consuming. But even I, as somebody that really understands this category, if I go somewhere and I see the pricing, so often right now, the pricing of a 20 versus a 10 versus a 5 versus a 2.5 is very, very similar pricing. And so I think especially with the kind of economically savvy C-store customer, they might be seeing the prices of those 20s and going, hey, cool, maybe I'll split this up over 2 nights. Maybe I'll share it, So I'll be interested to see. I don't think that if we see a 5 or a 10 milligram cap, that it's going to kind of be a death nail. I think the consumer will absolutely adjust. And, in a market like Illinois, if they really need the higher dose stuff, I have people in my life, my husband is one of them, that needs a stronger than 25. He goes to the dispensary, and that's okay. So speaking of potential caps, we are facing an extinction level event for this category if nothing is changed by November 12th. there's a lot of convenience retailers that are not yet in this. It obviously is not yet, it's providing growth, but it's not yet a core category. Dan, from your perspective, what would you say to a retailer that says, this isn't that important to me? Why should I care about this looming hemp ban?
So I think we'll see what happens with this ban or not. I think it's very important to get in the game. I think it's if you're, again, I think everyone's goal is to get customer counts up and transaction counts up, right? So if majority of our customers is getting gas and then coming in to get their cold drinks or tobacco or nicotine fix, this is a key category that you can reach out to. Our customers, speak to this stuff. So as far as the ban part, like I think, right now we're kind of just holding our horses a little bit. We're not really growing more SKUs. We're kind of just holding what we have, and we're just kind of hanging tight to see what happens. So I think we're kind of treading light, but I think like it's it would help a lot of people to have some peace of mind if they knew what's going to happen. So I don't blame people holding out to see what happens. So yeah, I think right now we're just kind of we're holding out to see what happens, and we're just kind of running this course as long as we can, and we're hoping for the best type of thing.
Yeah. And, we as, I say we, I'm not a retailer, but we as convenience retailers, we know what happens when a product with a proven consumer demand that's been on the market, they try to ban it. We see it with flavored vapor all over the place. 80% of the market right now is technically illegal products. We're finally seeing some action on the FDA side of trying to fix that. But that's bad, not just for retailers that were carrying flavored. It's bad for every retailer because that customer is going to go find what they want where they can buy it. And we know that people will carry this stuff, even with beverages. Like, we know people will carry this. So it's something we all should be caring about. Rick, obviously, as a brand in this space, you're heavily involved in what's going on. What would be your advice for retailers on what they could be doing, how they could be helping to try to push for positive regulation?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is awareness, both of the drinks that they're offering, so people know that these are something you can buy today. But then, just as importantly, that messaging that, hey, this is at risk, and if the consumers who are demanding these products are consuming them every day, if they don't start speaking up and letting the legislators know that, hey, we really care about these products, these are safe, like this is not some big bad scary thing, we need to focus on regulation. That would be my biggest call to action is, how can you continue to let your customers know that this November ban is coming, and then also how to reach out to their local legislators. And there's a lot of great resources. WSWA has really been leaning in on this. We're partnering with the Hemp Beverage Alliance on some additional kind of campaign messaging. So there'll be a lot more to come, but those would be my two big things: awareness of the category that it exists today, and that it may not exist. It's November 12th.
Yeah, and
Rick,
I think
Rick,
that's
just
hugely important.
just sorry to jump in, Rick. So is there like any way, like as a retailer, where I don't know if it's something you guys want to do, but like some kind of marketing as the point of purchase type of thing, where there is something that's educating the customer, like, hey, this is opposed to relying on the managers or the cashiers or whatnot. Is that something that would be wise? Yeah. Okay. We'll work together.
Yeah, absolutely. From our side, from our brand side, we're going to be rolling out more kind of advocacy focused messaging here this summer. And then would also say, from a retailer point of view, also the generic, more generic category messaging from the WSWA, which is just all about safe hemp beverages. That's just really clear, simple messaging with really clear, calls to action of who to reach out to. So certainly, and Dan, we can hit offline some resources, but certainly would encourage retailers to lean into that, ask brands about it, but also there are great resources out there today too.
Yeah, and so the Wine and Spirit Wholesalers of America, WSWA, their assets It's a QR code that goes straight to a page where they can contact their member of Congress, their Senate member, with kind of a pre-written letter. So it really is simple, clean advocacy. And we will make a point of linking to that in the show notes for this podcast for folks. And Rick, as HBA gets something up and running, you hit me up and we'll make sure to cover it at CSP as well. And this is super important. Technomic data shows that the majority of THC beverage shoppers at convenience are not aware the ban is coming. So that awareness is going to be key. And Congress needs to hear from their representatives that they don't want this taken away. So one last question, obviously regulations are not great. They're not a positive thing. I don't want to end on this. So even knowing that ban is sitting there, and I'll note, this week we saw President Trump weigh in, send a letter to Mike Johnson, encouraging not just to allow his CBD program to continue, but actually encouraging Congress to pass either an extension or Congressman Barr's amendment that would allow this category to continue. It was the first time that we saw the White House throw some form of support behind low-dose intoxicating beverages, and products as a whole, in fact. So that has me hopeful. What has each of you hopeful about this category moving forward, even with that November deadline? And Dan, we'll start with you.
So I'm kind of encouraged just to see what's happened recently with the FDA, with Views, Alto is coming out with flavors for e-cigs. For us, that's very big. And then I believe Juul is going to be coming out with flavors as well. So I'm encouraged that the FDA is working with RJR and Juul. They're working together a little bit more. And so my assumption is that, you're going to get all the illicit vapes out. I think that may hurt our business, but I think at the same time, we're going to have FDA approved e-cigs, vapes and stuff. So I'm encouraged that the FDA is trying to figure out a way we can get the hemp beverages, and they're starting to get the wheels turning, in my opinion, that it's starting to be on the radar, and I think we're trying to figure out how to best do this safely and do it the right way, and make sure the bad actors type of things are out type of thing, and make sure the legit guys are in. So that's what I'm hopeful and what I foresee is going to happen.
Absolutely a reason to be hopeful. Regulation, not prohibition. Rick, what has you hopeful or optimistic on this date?
Yeah. So kind of similar, which is just the overall kind of tenor and tone around these products and really cannabis in general. Obviously, there's a lot of movement on the medical cannabis side to Schedule 3. Right now, we're in the middle of hearings on recreational cannabis, moving to Schedule 3, which hopefully continues forward as well. So I think all of that is kind of showing that, hey, American consumers want these products and they can consume them safely. And then that extends right into hemp beverages, where I think now at this point, while I still think awareness is low and we need to continue to build that, the consumers that have discovered this have clearly said, we like these products and we do not want them going away. So for us, that's kind of the clearest indication on why we stay pedal down, because this category is going to be around. You've got obviously the C-Store channel leaning in. You've got National Restaurant Association weighing in now, the distributors, not necessarily alcohol suppliers yet, but I think that'll come in time. So for us, it's really just that adoption and comfort with these products, that there's that roadmap there for us. There might be a speed bump here. We certainly hope there isn't. But over time, don't bet against the American consumer, and the American consumer saying they want these products.
Absolutely. It was brought up at BevNet a couple weeks ago that the core consumer of these products are 30 to 45-year-old women. And if you try to take something away from that age group, which is mine, it doesn't end well. So I pray for our regulators if they try to yank this off come November, because they're going to have a lot of angry and cranky moms coming after them. So makes me nervous but hopeful. So thank you both for your time today. Thank you for all the work that you're doing in this category and sharing your insights with our listeners.
Of course, thank you.
No problem.